The wind howled across the desolate plains of Sonora, dragging with it the dry scent of forgotten graves. Diego Morales walked alone through the cracked earth, his boots sinking into the dust of his childhood. The sky was an ocean of fading gold and ash, and every gust seemed to whisper his name, Diego, Diego, as if the desert itself remembered what he had done. He hadn't returned here in 15 years, not since the night everything burned, the house, the family, the innocence. Yet when he saw the remnants of the Morales ranch, the memories struck like a bullet to the skull. The wooden beams, blackened by time, still smelled faintly of smoke. He could almost hear the screams again, his father's rage, his mother's sobs, the terrified silence of his little brother, Mateo. Diego's hands trembled as he touched a scorched wall. "It's all gone," he whispered. But the silence around him disagreed. It pulsed with ghosts. He thought he saw movement at the corner of his eye, a shadow slipping between the ruins. His pulse raced. No one's here, he told himself. No one's been here for years. But the shadow lingered. Inside what used to be the living room, a single chair remained standing. On it lay a rusted rosary blackened by soot. Diego knelt before it, feeling the weight of guilt crawl through his veins like molten lead. "Forgive me, Madre," he muttered, his voice cracking. "Forgive me for surviving." The rosary's beads were warm in his palm. Too warm. He froze. The chair creaked. Then he heard it. A child's laugh, faint, echoing, impossible. Diego stumbled backward, clutching his chest. No. His breath came in short bursts, his vision blurred. He spun around, but the room was empty, only dust and ruin. Yet the laughter grew louder, circling him, until it turned into crying. He ran outside into the bleeding sunset and fell to his knees. The wind whipped around him like a furious spirit. The desert was alive with sound, whispers, sobs, the burning echo of the past. "Stop!" he screamed, pressing his palms against his ears. "Leave me alone." But the wind didn't stop. It carried with it a whisper that chilled his blood. "You left him to die, Diego." He froze. The world tilted. "No, I tried to save him," he muttered. The whisper turned into a roar. "Liar." As darkness swallowed the horizon, Diego collapsed beside the ruins of his home, his mind flickering between memory and madness. The desert watched in silence, and far in the distance, a lone coyote howled. A requiem for the man who would never again know peace. When he opened his eyes hours later, the stars burned cold and merciless above him. The rosary was gone. The morning sun crept over the jagged hills, staining the world in shades of copper and sorrow. Diego awoke with the taste of dust and blood in his mouth. His head throbbed, his clothes were torn, and the desert chill still clung to his bones. For a moment, he didn't know where he was, until he saw the ruins again, the blackened skeleton of his old home, standing against the horizon like a grave marker. He rose unsteadily, brushing sand from his hands. The rosary was gone, but the feeling it left in his palm still burned. Somewhere between dream and delirium, he remembered the laughter, Mateo's laughter, echoing through the night. Was it real, he wondered, or had the ghosts finally broken through his mind? He turned toward the only structure still half standing, the Morales Chapel. Its wooden door hung crooked, half devoured by termites and time. Diego hesitated, then pushed it open. The smell inside was unbearable, mold, ashes, and something older, something that reeked of guilt. Light slanted through a hole in the roof, illuminating the small altar. A cracked statue of the Virgin stood there, her porcelain face shattered, her eyes blind. Beneath her lay scattered offerings left by strangers, dried flowers, melted candles, coins. It seemed that people still came here. But why? As Diego stepped closer, the air thickened. He could hear faint whispers again, prayers maybe, or something darker. His name slipped through the murmur like a knife. Diego. He turned sharply, but there was no one. Only the dust swirling in the light. Then his gaze fell upon a line of words scrawled on the wall in faded charcoal. "Blood calls to blood." His breath caught. The handwriting, it was his father's. The world tilted again, and a memory struck him like lightning. He was 13, hiding in this very chapel as his father raged outside, drunk, shouting about betrayal and sin. His mother screamed for mercy, and Mateo was crying. Then came the smell of kerosene, the crackle of fire, the heat, and his own feet running, leaving them all behind. Diego sank to his knees, gripping his head. "I didn't mean to..." he gasped, but the chapel seemed to close in on him. The cracked statue above the altar leaned forward, and for a fraction of a second, it looked alive, her lips twisted into a cruel, knowing smile. He stumbled back toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own. The candles flared to life, their flames tall and blue. Shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes, human shapes, moving closer. He heard a whisper behind him, soft as a child's breath. "You left me, hermano." Diego froze. The voice was unmistakable. Mateo. He turned around slowly. In the corner, where the light didn't reach, stood a small figure, barefoot, dressed in rags, eyes hollow, glowing faintly with sorrow and rage. "Mateo," Diego whispered. The boy smiled, or tried to. The skin on his face flickered like smoke. "You promised you'd come back." Diego's chest tightened. "I tried. I swear I tried." "Liar," the boy hissed, and the candles went out. Darkness swallowed the chapel. Diego screamed, reaching for the door, but something cold grabbed his wrist. He tore free, bursting into the sunlight outside, collapsing into the dirt. When he dared to look back, the chapel was still, silent and empty, as if nothing had happened. But on his arm, a child's handprint burned red into his skin. He stared at it, trembling. "He's not real," he whispered. "He can't be real." And yet deep inside, Diego knew. The ghosts of his past had found him, and they were no longer content to haunt his dreams. They wanted him awake. The road to San Judas was cracked and empty, cutting through the heart of northern Mexico like a wound that never healed. Diego drove the rusted pickup he'd borrowed from a gas station attendant who hadn't dared to ask questions. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, the burns on his wrists still raw, the mark of a ghost or of guilt. The sun hung low, bleeding red across the desert. Each mile he drove brought back a fragment of memory, sharper than glass. San Judas, the town he had fled from 15 years ago, was where everything began and where everything had ended. The closer he got, the more the voices returned. At first just whispers, then murmurs, then words that clawed their way into his mind. "You never left, Diego. You just forgot." He pressed his foot harder on the accelerator, as if he could outrun the sound. When he reached the outskirts of San Judas, the world seemed frozen in time. The same faded cantinas, the same rusted fences, the same church tower rising like a scar against the sky, but the streets were empty, windows boarded, silence heavier than death. He parked in front of what used to be El Gallo Rojo, the bar where his father drank himself into madness. Inside, dust coated everything like ash. The air was thick with the smell of stale liquor and rot. Behind the counter, a crucifix hung crooked, its Christ missing an arm. Diego poured himself a shot from an old bottle, his hands shaking. He swallowed, and the burn felt almost holy. Then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned, ready to strike, but it was only an old man, thin as a ghost himself, with cataract-clouded eyes. He wore a priest's collar, though it was stained and yellow with age. "Diego Morales," the priest said softly. His voice trembled with both fear and recognition. "You came back." Diego stared. "Father Salazar, you're still alive." "Alive," the old man echoed, "but cursed to remember." He limped closer, studying Diego's face. "You should not have returned. The dead don't forgive easily here." "I need answers," Diego said, his voice breaking. "I need to know what happened that night. My father, my brother, they keep calling to me." Father Salazar's eyes darkened. "Some doors should never be reopened. You saw their faces once in this life. If you see them again, it will not be in mercy." Diego slammed his hand on the counter. "Tell me." The priest flinched. Then slowly he nodded. "Your father's rage was not his own," he whispered. "He was consumed by something older than any of us, a darkness that took root in this land long before your family, and when he offered blood to it, it answered." Diego felt the room tilt. "Blood? Your mother's," the priest said, tears glistening in his eyes. "And your brother's soul was caught in between, neither living nor dead. That's why you still hear him. You opened the door when you ran, and now it's open again." The candles in the bar flickered violently. The walls groaned. Diego turned, heart hammering, and in the cracked mirror behind the counter he saw them, dozens of faces, pale and hollow, staring back at him from the darkness. His family, the townsfolk, all the ones who had burned. When he looked again, the mirror was empty. Father Salazar clutched his crucifix. "You must leave, Diego. Before they take you too. But Diego couldn't move. The whisper was back. Mateo's voice, tender and cruel at once. It's too late, hermano. You already belong to us. The bells of San Judas rang at dawn, though no one was left to ring them. The sound rolled across the empty town like a warning from another world. Diego stood outside the church, staring up at the crumbling steeple that pierced the smoky sky. He hadn't set foot inside since the fire, since the night screams turned into silence. Father Salazar had vanished. When Diego woke that morning in the back of the bar, the priest's chair was overturned, the crucifix shattered on the floor, and something dark and sticky trailed toward the church door. Diego followed the trail without hesitation, his heart a war drum in his chest. Inside, the air was thick and cold. The altar was cracked, the walls carved with strange symbols that glowed faintly red beneath the candlelight. He remembered those marks. His father had carved them once, muttering prayers that were not prayers at all. He stepped forward. His boots echoed against the stone floor, and somewhere beneath he could hear it. The sound of dripping, slow, constant, like the heartbeat of the earth. At the altar's base, a wooden hatch lay half-hidden beneath a rug. Diego knelt, pulled it open, and was met with a gust of air that smelled of rust and rot. Stairs descended into darkness. He hesitated only for a second before climbing down. The tunnel beneath the church was older than the town itself. The walls were damp, carved from ancient stone. As Diego moved deeper, the light from above faded until only the flame of his lighter remained. Trembling, fragile, the dripping grew louder. It wasn't water. At the end of the tunnel, he found a door made of iron, etched with words in Latin and Nahuatl. He didn't recognize most of them, but one phrase stood out clearly. Sangre abre la puerta. Blood opens the door. He felt a cold dread crawl up his spine. Still, he pressed his palm against the metal. It was warm and alive, and then he heard it again faintly from beyond the door. Diego, Mateo's voice. Something inside him broke. He drew his knife and sliced his palm open. Blood spilled down his fingers and touched the door. The iron screamed. The walls shuddered. The door creaked open, revealing a vast chamber lit by candles floating in bowls of dark liquid. The ground was covered in bones. In the center stood an altar of obsidian, and on it, Father Salazar, crucified upside down, eyes gouged out, lips sewn shut. Diego staggered forward, trembling. No, what did they do to you? But then he heard breathing, heavy, wet, inhuman. From the shadows behind the altar, a figure rose, too tall, too thin, its skin the color of ash. Its eyes glowed red like burning coals. Around its neck hung the same rosary Diego had found at the ruins of his home. "Who are you?" Diego gasped. The creature tilted its head, smiling with teeth that were far too many. "You know me," it whispered in a voice that was both his father's and his own. "I am what your family worshipped, what your blood remembers." Diego stumbled back, the lighter shaking in his hand. "You killed them." "No," it said, stepping closer. "You did. You ran, and your fear fed me. Every scream, every tear, all mine." He fell to his knees, clutching his head as visions flooded him. His father's face twisted in devotion, his mother's body burning, Mateo reaching out through the flames. He remembered it all now. The door, the ritual, his own hand lighting the match. The creature leaned close, its breath cold as winter. "You cannot escape what you are, Diego Morales. Madness is just memory you refuse to face." It raised its clawed hand and pressed it against his chest. Diego screamed as pain exploded through him, and the walls began to pulse with red light, as if the church itself had come alive. The bones at his feet stirred. Then, silence. When Diego opened his eyes, he was standing in the middle of the church again. The hatch was gone. The floor was clean. Morning sunlight streamed through the broken windows. But Father Salazar's crucifix still lay shattered on the floor, and in Diego's palm, carved deep into the flesh, were 3 words written in blood: "We are one." The sun had vanished behind a haze of smoke, leaving San Judas trapped in an endless dusk. Diego wandered the streets like a ghost among ghosts, his mind unraveling thread by thread. Every window he passed reflected a different version of himself, one with burned hands, one with blood on his face, one smiling when he shouldn't be. He tried to remember how long he had been here, a day, a week. Time had become liquid, dripping through his fingers like the blood that still leaked from the wound in his palm. He pressed a dirty cloth against it, but it wouldn't stop bleeding. The words carved into his skin, "We are one," throbbed with a strange warmth, pulsing like a second heart. He heard voices again, not from the dead this time, from the living. A group of people stood in the plaza, gathered around the dry fountain. Men, women, children, all silent, all staring at him. Their faces were blank, their eyes pale as glass. When Diego approached, they moved in unison, parting to let him through. At the fountain's center stood a woman draped in black, her veil fluttering in the hot wind. She raised her head slowly, revealing a face Diego recognized, his mother's. But she was younger now, untouched by the fire, her eyes calm and distant. "Madre," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "You came back, mijo. You did what he couldn't. What are you talking about?" Her gaze shifted toward the church in the distance. He tried to contain it, to seal what he had awakened. But blood cannot hold blood, only flesh. Diego shook his head, backing away. "You're not real." Her expression hardened. "Then why do you still hear me?" The people around the fountain began to hum, a low, rhythmic sound that vibrated in his skull. Their eyes rolled back. The air grew heavy with heat and rot. Diego stumbled, covering his ears, but the sound only grew louder. It was a chant, ancient and wrong, and yet every word felt familiar, as if he had once known their meaning. He fell to his knees. The world tilted. The fountain cracked open like a wound, and black water gushed out, flooding the square. The villagers didn't move. They just kept chanting, their feet sinking into the rising pool. The black water reached Diego's knees, then his chest. Then, silence. The water stilled. The villagers were gone. His mother's veil floated past him, dissolving as it touched his skin. Diego gasped for breath, clawing his way to dry ground. The plaza was empty again. Only the smell of decay lingered. He looked down at his reflection in the dark puddle at his feet and froze. The face staring back wasn't his, it was Mateo's. "Stop!" Diego shouted, smashing his fist into the water. Ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection, but the boy's voice echoed through the ripples. "You can't kill what's already inside you." He stumbled backward, his body shaking violently, his vision blurred, his thoughts tangled. He saw flashes, the night of the fire, his father's knife, his brother screaming his name. What if the creature hadn't taken Mateo? What if it had taken him? A laugh rose from his throat, sharp, manic, uncontrollable. He pressed his bloody hand against his face and laughed until tears mixed with blood. When the laughter finally broke into sobs, Diego realized he was no longer alone. Standing at the edge of the plaza was a little boy holding the same rosary, his eyes glowing faintly red. Mateo smiled. "You're close now, hermano. The truth is waiting beneath the mountain." Then the boy vanished, leaving behind only the rosary, clean, shining, untouched by fire. Diego picked it up, trembling. Somewhere deep in the earth, a sound rumbled like thunder. The mountain was calling. The mountain rose from the desert like the spine of some ancient god, black against the bleeding horizon. Diego Morales stood at its base, the rosary clenched in his fist. The air was heavy and still, the silence almost alive. Even the wind refused to touch this place. He knew this mountain, Cerro de las Animas, the Hill of Souls. His father used to speak of it in drunken whispers, saying the earth here breathed when the dead were restless. Now Diego could hear it, a low rhythmic sound, like lungs drawing in air from beneath the ground. The mountain was breathing. He began to climb. The stones beneath his boots burned like embers, though no fire burned nearby. The higher he went, the more the world below seemed to fade. The town, the church, the desert, all swallowed by haze as if he were walking out of reality itself. Halfway up, he found the remains of an old camp. Torn tents, broken lanterns, bones scattered like seeds. In the dirt he found a journal, its pages blackened by age. The writing was his father's. "The mountain demands blood. It remembers every offering, but one blood binds it, my son's. Only through them can it wake." Diego's hands trembled. No, you can't mean..." But the truth pressed down on him like the weight of the mountain itself. His father had tried to use them, his own sons, and as vessels to contain the darkness. Mateo had died in the ritual, and Diego had lived, but not whole. Something of him had stayed here. The wind shifted, carrying a whisper through the rocks. "Finish what he began." He turned sharply, his eyes scanning the ridge. A figure stood above, small, pale, unmoving. Mateo. "Stop!" Diego called, climbing faster, slipping on loose stones. "Tell me what you want." Mateo's voice floated down, soft and cold. "I want to go home." When Diego reached the summit, the world below was gone. Only the sky and the endless dark mouth of a crater remained. Steam rose from it, smelling of iron and earth. The rosary in his hand began to burn. Inside the crater, shapes moved. Not human, not animal. Shadows crawling like liquid, whispering in tongues older than words. Diego fell to his knees, his head pounding, his thoughts breaking apart like shattered glass. He saw his father again, standing on this very ridge, his arms outstretched to the heavens. "Take me," his father had shouted. "Take me instead." But the mountain hadn't listened. Diego felt something surge within him. Anger, guilt, madness. He screamed into the pit. "You want blood? Take mine." He tore open the wound on his palm, letting the blood drip onto the earth. The mountain groaned in response, a deep, monstrous sound that shook the sky. The shadows below writhed, reaching upward. From the darkness rose a single figure, not the creature from the church, but something worse. A reflection. It had his face, his eyes, his voice. "Diego Morales," it whispered. "You were born from me." The thing smiled, its skin splitting like bark. "You think you can bury the past? You are the past." He stumbled back, shaking his head. "No, you're not real." But when the creature stepped into the light, Diego saw the same scar on its hand, the same wound that refused to heal. He understood then. The mountain wasn't alive. It was him. Every memory he'd buried, every scream he'd denied, every face he'd burned, they had rooted here, feeding the thing that now stood before him. The reflection spread its arms. "Welcome home." The ground split open. Diego screamed as he fell into the crater, swallowed whole by the breathing earth. And for a moment, just a moment, the mountain exhaled. He fell forever. There was no ground, no sky, no time, only the endless descent through fire and whispering shadows. Diego Morales felt his body tearing apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but thought and pain. The darkness was not empty. It pulsed, breathed, and spoke in 1,000 voices that were all his own. When he finally hit the ground, it wasn't earth that caught him. It was flesh. The walls of the cavern were alive, glistening and warm, beating like the inside of a giant heart. Every pulse echoed inside his skull. He tried to move, but the floor clung to him, sucking at his skin like wet clay. "Where am I?" he gasped. A voice answered, soft and cruel. "Home." He turned and saw his father standing a few feet away, younger now, eyes blazing with devotion. "I told you," the old man said, smiling faintly. "Blood calls to blood. You finally listened." "This isn't real," Diego whispered. "You're dead." "Death?" His father laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "There's no death here, only continuation. You and I, we are the same offering." From the walls, faces began to emerge, melting, screaming, reforming. His mother's, Mateo's, Father Salazar's. Their mouths moved in silent agony, chanting words Diego couldn't understand. The air grew thick with heat and the stench of decay. He covered his ears, but the chant only grew louder, vibrating in his bones. His father stepped closer, the rosary dangling from his wrist. "You've been running from me your whole life, Diego, from what you are. But the mountain always takes back what belongs to it." "I'm not you," Diego shouted, pushing him away. His father smiled sadly. "No, you're worse." Lightning flashed across the cavern ceiling, red, violent, blinding. Suddenly, Diego was no longer underground. He stood atop the mountain again, the crater below now a vast sea of molten light. The sky above burned crimson, torn open like a wound, the night of the red sky. The ground shook as the shadows rose from the pit, countless figures, black and formless, climbing toward him. Their whispers filled the air. "Diego, Diego, Diego." He clutched his head, screaming. "What do you want from me?" The voices answered as one. To remember. Images flooded his mind. The fire, his brother's screams, the knife in his own hand. He saw himself lighting the match, saw the flames devour everything. It wasn't an accident, it had never been, he had done it. He fell to his knees, trembling. "No, I was a child. You were chosen," the voices replied. "Chosen to carry what your father could not." He looked up, and there was Mateo standing at the edge of the crater, his eyes burning brighter than the fire below. "Brother?" the boy said softly. You don't have to fight anymore. Diego reached out, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, Mateo. I